The autumn sky over Northern California's Camp Pendleton stretched endlessly blue, deceptively peaceful as Captain Zara Ghost. Nakamura banked her FA-18E Super Hornet in a lazy circle above the training grounds. At 32, she possessed the kind of weathered competence that came from surviving places most people couldn't pronounce, let alone navigate. Her dark eyes, inherited from her Japanese grandmother, held depths that spoke of Kandahar nights and Syrian dawn patrols. The nickname Ghost hadn't come from her ability to disappear, though she was exceptional at that too, but from her uncanny talent for materializing exactly where the enemy least expected her. Today was supposed to be routine, a simple demonstration flight for visiting brass and Pentagon observers, showcasing the latest avionics upgrades. Nothing more complex than barrel rolls and precision landings for men in expensive suits who'd never felt G-forces crush their ribcage or tasted the metallic fear that comes with surface-to-air missile locks. "Ghost, this is Tower," crackled the radio in her helmet. "You've got company inbound from the northwest. 4 civilian vehicles, moving fast toward the perimeter near Sector 7. Zara's grip tightened imperceptibly on the stick. Sector 7 housed the base's daycare facility and the new community college extension program. Her younger sister Maya attended classes there. Maya, who'd chosen books over bullets, campus life over combat zones. The same Maya who'd begged Zara to just come home and be normal for once. "Tower Ghost, any word on those vehicles? Scheduled visit." "Static, then. Negative Ghost. Security's reporting possible hostile intent. 4 males heavily armed. They've breached the outer fence." The world crystallized with familiar clarity. Zara had felt this moment before, in the skis above Mosul when ISIS fighters had taken a school, over the Hindu Kush when Taliban forces had cornered a medical convoy. That precise instant when training, instinct, and something deeper than both converged into purpose. Below, she could see them now. 4 black SUVs racing across the manicured base grounds like angry beetles, kicking up dust clouds as they approached the cluster of low-slung educational buildings. Her sister was down there somewhere, probably in her constitutional law class, completely unaware that her world was about to change. "Tower, Ghost requesting permission to engage." "Ghost, you're not armed for ground targets. Wait for." "Tower." Her voice carried the weight of 7 combat deployments and too many friends' funerals. "There are civilians down there, students, kids." She rolled the Super Hornet into a steep dive, afterburners screaming defiance against the California sky. The men below had made a fatal miscalculation. They'd expected soft targets, defenseless prey. They hadn't expected Zara Ghost Nakamura, and they certainly hadn't expected what she was about to unleash upon them with nothing but skill, determination, and 18,000 pounds of military-grade fury. The clock on her instrument panel read 13:47 hours. In exactly 10 seconds, 4 gang members would learn the difference between predator and prey. The lead SUV's driver, a muscled ex-convict named Tors who'd done 8 years for armed robbery, felt the first tremor of unease as the jet's shadow swept over them. His 3 companions were typical street muscle. Vance, who collected protection money with brass knuckles. Rodrigo, whose specialty was intimidation through creative violence. And Jackson, barely 19 but already hardened by foster homes and juvenile detention. They'd been hired for what should have been simple work: grab the Nakamura girl, send a message to her military sister about respecting certain business arrangements. "Just some flyboy showing off," Tors muttered, pressing harder on the accelerator. The base's academic buildings grew larger through the windshield, their red-tiled roofs gleaming in the afternoon sun. Above them, Zara had already calculated angles, speeds, and most importantly, fear factors. The FA-18's engines weren't just propulsion systems. They were psychological weapons capable of producing sound waves that could shatter windows and nerves with equal efficiency. "Ghost to Tower, I'm going to buzz them," close enough to rattle their teeth. Ghost, that's extremely dangerous. You're flying at minimal altitude over populated. Copy that tower, danger close. She dropped the Super Hornet to barely 200 feet, afterburners at full throttle. The sonic boom that followed wasn't quite breaking the sound barrier. That would have shattered every window on base. But it was close enough to make the ground shake and car alarms scream across 3 counties. Tor's SUV swerved violently as the jet's exhaust wash hit them like an invisible sledgehammer. The vehicle behind them, Rodrigo at the wheel, spun completely around, tires smoking against asphalt as he fought for control. What the hell was that? Vance's voice cracked with the first hint of panic. Inside the college building, Maya Nakamura looked up from her textbook as the windows rattled in their frames. She recognized that sound, had heard it countless times growing up on military bases around the world. Her sister was up there, and something was very wrong. Zara pulled up sharply, G-forces pressing her deep into the pilot's seat as she climbed for another pass. Through her HUD, she tracked the vehicles regrouping, their occupants undoubtedly shaken but still moving toward the buildings. She needed to escalate without crossing the line into deadly force, a surgical application of terror that would send them running without turning her into a war criminal. Tower Ghost, I need you to evacuate those buildings, now. Already in progress. Base security is inbound, ETA 4 minutes. 4 minutes. In combat time, that was eternity. Anything could happen in 4 minutes. Hostages taken, lives lost, sisters hurt. Zara had survived 7 deployments by refusing to let other people's timelines dictate her actions. The second pass came from the east, Zara approaching with the sun at her back like some ancient war god riding fire across the heavens. This time she flew even lower, close enough that her landing gear almost kissed the roof of Tor's SUV. The downwash from her wings created a localized hurricane, lifting debris and hurling it against windshields like shrapnel. Jackson, the youngest, was the first to brake. Man, this is crazy. They got jets coming after us. Shut up, Tor snarled, but his knuckles were white on the steering wheel. He'd done hard time in Pelican Bay, had faced down prison gangs and corrupt guards, but he'd never had an FA-18 Super Hornet hunting him across open ground. This wasn't part of the plan. Zara's radio crackled. Ghost, this is Colonel Morrison. What's your status up there? Colonel Sarah Morrison. Her commanding officer, and one of the few people who truly understood what Zara was capable of when circumstances demanded it. They'd served together in Afghanistan, had watched each other's backs through the kind of missions that never made it into official reports. 4 vehicles, 12 to 16 hostiles approaching the college building. My sister's in there, Colonel. A pause, then, do what you have to do, Ghost. We'll handle the paperwork. That was military speak for, unleash hell and we'll make it legal afterward. Zara's third pass was a masterpiece of tactical intimidation. She came in from the north at a 45-degree angle, afterburners creating twin trails of superheated air that turned the autumn sky into a canvas of power and fury. At the last second, she kicked the rudder hard left, throwing the Super Hornet into a knife-edge pass that brought her wingtip within 20 feet of Tor's windshield. The psychological effect was instantaneous. Tor screamed, actually screamed, as 18 tons of military aircraft missed his head by a margin that could be measured in heartbeats. The SUV swerved so violently that it clipped a concrete barrier, sending sparks cascading across the asphalt. Behind them, Rodrigo's vehicle had stopped entirely, its occupants spilling out to take cover behind whatever they could find. Only 2 vehicles were still moving toward the target, their drivers either too committed or too terrified to think clearly. Inside the college building, evacuation alarms were wailing. Students poured from doorways like disturbed ants, faculty members herding them toward designated safe zones. Maya Nakamura moved with the crowd, but her eyes remained fixed on the sky where her sister danced with death and physics in equal measure. "She's protecting us," Maya whispered to her roommate Sarah Chen. "That's my sister up there." Above, Zara was already planning her fourth pass. Each attack had to be more intense than the last, escalating the psychological pressure until even the most determined criminals understood that continuing forward meant certain destruction. Vance pressed his face against the passenger window, watching the jet climb for another attack run. "Tors, man, we need to get out of here. This ain't worth whatever they're paying us." "We got a job to do," Tors replied, but his voice lacked conviction. The simple smash and grab he'd signed up for had transformed into something from a war movie, complete with aerial bombardment and the very real possibility of becoming crater-shaped stains on the California landscape. Zara's fourth pass introduced a new element: precision aerobatics that demonstrated exactly how much control she possessed over her aircraft. She rolled inverted at the last second, flying upside down barely 50 feet above the SUVs, her helmet visible through the canopy as she stared down at them like an avenging angel. The message was clear: "I can put this jet exactly where I want it when I want it there. Your lives exist at my discretion." Jackson abandoned the lead vehicle entirely, sprinting toward a drainage ditch with the desperate energy of someone who'd finally grasped the magnitude of his situation. Rodrigo's crew had already disappeared, their abandoned SUV sitting empty with its doors flung open like the wings of a dead bird. That left Tors and Vance, still moving toward the college building but at reduced speed, their initial confidence replaced by the kind of grim determination that comes from burning bridges behind you. Zara's radio buzzed. "Ghost, this is base security. We have visual on the remaining targets. 2 vehicles, approximately 6 individuals still mobile." "Copy base security. How's that evacuation coming?" "Buildings clear. All civilians accounted for." The knot of tension in Zara's chest loosened fractionally. Maya was safe. Whatever happened next, her sister wouldn't be caught in the crossfire of other people's poor decisions. She pulled up into a steep climb, gaining altitude for what she intended to be the final demonstration. The next pass wouldn't be about intimidation. It would be about ending this before anyone got hurt. Below, Tor's SUV had nearly reached the college parking lot, close enough to the building that any further advance would constitute a direct threat to civilian life. Zara rolled the Super Hornet into a power dive that would have impressed her old instructor at Top Gun. The altimeter unwound like a slot machine in reverse. 1,000 feet, 800, 500. The ground rushed up to meet her with terrifying clarity, every crack in the asphalt visible through her HUD. At 200 feet, she leveled off and lit the afterburners. The sonic boom that followed wasn't quite supersonic, but it was close enough to blow out every window in a 3-block radius and set off car alarms from San Diego to Los Angeles. Tor's world exploded into chaos. The windshield spiderwebbed instantly, transforming into a kaleidoscope of fractured glass that cut his vision into 1,000 jagged pieces. The SUV's engine coughed, sputtered, and died as the sonic shock wave overwhelmed its electronic systems. Even the radio went silent, its circuits fried by electromagnetic pulse, effects that Zara had calculated with surgical precision. "We're done," Vance whispered, his hands shaking as he tried to clear broken glass from his lap. "We're so done." The second SUV, driven by Marcus, a career criminal who'd somehow maintained his nerve longer than his companions, suffered even worse. The shock wave caught his vehicle at the exact moment he was taking a corner, sending it into a spectacular roll that ended with the SUV upside down in a decorative pond, wheels spinning uselessly in the autumn air. Zara pulled up from her attack run with the satisfaction of a job well done. Below, the remaining gang members were abandoning their vehicles and fleeing on foot, their original mission forgotten in the face of overwhelming aerial superiority. Some ran toward the base perimeter, hopping to escape the way they'd entered. Others simply ran, direction irrelevant, driven by the primal need to put distance between themselves and the angel of death that had materialized from the California sky. Ghost to base security, targets are dispersed and fleeing, vehicles disabled, no casualties reported. Copy that, Ghost. Outstanding work up there. Base security teams are in pursuit of remaining suspects. Colonel Morrison's voice cut through the radio chatter. Ghost, bring her home. We'll debrief in 30 minutes. Zara banked the Super Hornet toward the runway, her hands steady on the controls despite the adrenaline still coursing through her system. As she descended through 3,000 feet, she could see emergency vehicles converging on the college building, their red and blue lights painting the afternoon in patriotic colors. Her sister was safe. The students were safe. 4 gang members had learned the hard way that attacking a military installation, especially one where Captain Zara Ghost Nakamura happened to be flying, was a mistake of cosmic proportions. But as she lined up for final approach, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that this incident was more than just random criminal activity. The timing was too convenient, the target too specific. Someone had known exactly where to find Maya, exactly when she'd be most vulnerable. The landing gear touched down with barely a whisper, testament to the thousands of hours Zara had spent perfecting her craft in some of the world's most dangerous airfields. As the Super Hornet rolled to a stop, ground crew members swarmed the aircraft with the efficient choreography of military precision. Through her canopy, she could see Colonel Morrison approaching, her expression unreadable behind aviator sunglasses that reflected the California sun like mirrors. The debriefing room smelled of coffee and bureaucracy, fluorescent lights casting everything in the harsh clarity that military facilities seemed to specialize in. Colonel Morrison sat across from Zara, a stack of incident reports growing between them as various department heads added their perspectives to what was already becoming a legendary story. Unauthorized low-level passes over populated areas, read Major Phillips from the Legal Affairs Office. Sonic booms exceeding noise ordinances. Use of military aircraft for civilian law enforcement purposes without proper authorization. Shut up, Phillips, Morrison said without looking up from her own report. Captain Nakamura prevented what could have been a hostage situation or worse. Her actions were well within the bounds of protecting civilian lives on a military installation. Zara remained silent, letting her commanding officer handle the political fallout. She'd learned long ago that successful military careers required knowing when to fight and when to let others fight for you. The question, continued Morrison, is how 4 gang members knew exactly where to find your sister and why they thought they could waltz onto a military base without consequences. That was the question that had been gnawing at Zara since the incident began. Maya was a college student, not a high-value target. She lived off-base, kept a low profile, had specifically chosen civilian life to avoid the complications that came with being related to someone in special operations. Has anyone interviewed Maya yet? Zara asked. She's with base security now, giving her statement. She mentioned something interesting. Apparently she's been getting phone calls recently. Someone asking questions about you, your deployment schedule, your personal life. Ice formed in Zara's stomach. Professional interest in her activities usually meant one of 2 things. Either she was being considered for promotion to a classified program, or someone with hostile intent was gathering intelligence for an operation. What kind of questions? The kind that suggests someone's been building a profile. Your call sign, your service record, your family connections. Maya thought it was some kind of military bureaucracy thing, paperwork for your security clearance renewal. Zara's mind raced through possibilities. Revenge from past operations. Industrial espionage from defense contractors. Foreign intelligence services testing American response capabilities. The list of people who might want to leverage her personal relationships was longer than she cared to contemplate. Colonel, I think today was a probe. Someone wanted to see how we'd respond to a direct threat against military family members. They weren't really after Maya. They were testing our reaction time, our protocols, our capabilities. Morrison leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. That's a disturbing possibility. If you're right, then today was just the opening move in a much larger game. The October sunset painted Camp Pendleton in shades of amber and gold, transforming the utilitarian military architecture into something almost beautiful. Zara sat on the steps of the officers' club, still in her flight suit, watching maintenance crews service the Super Hornet that had become the day's unlikely hero. Maya approached carefully, as if afraid that sudden movements might trigger another aerial attack. At 24, she possessed the same dark eyes as her sister, but where Zara's held depths shaped by combat, Maya's reflected the gentler experiences of academia and civilian life. "That was you up there," Maya said, settling beside her sister on the concrete steps, flying like some kind of avenging angel. "That was me doing my job. Your job doesn't usually involve protecting me specifically." Zara turned to study her sister's face, searching for signs of trauma or fear. Instead, she found something unexpected: pride. Maya was looking at her the way she had when they were children, when Zara had stood up to schoolyard bullies or defended her from their father's alcohol-fueled rages. "Maya, those phone calls you've been getting. I need you to think carefully about exactly what was asked, how the questions were phrased." The caller said he was from some military administrative office, updating records for active personnel. He wanted to know where I lived, where I went to school, my daily schedule. I thought it was normal. You military people are always updating something. Did he ask about anyone else? Other family members, friends, people I might care about? Maya's expression shifted as understanding dawned. He asked about Mom, whether I still talked to her where she was living now, and about David. David, Zara's ex-fiancé, a Marine Corps captain who'd been killed by an IED in Helmand Province 3 years ago. Someone was building a comprehensive psychological profile, identifying pressure points that could be used to manipulate or motivate her. "Maya, I need you to pack a bag. Tonight, you're going to stay with Mom in Arizona until we figure out what's happening here. I'm not running away because some criminals made poor life choices. This isn't about criminals, Maya. This is about someone who knows too much about us, someone who's planning something bigger than what happened today." The sisters sat in silence, watching the sun disappear behind the Pacific horizon. Somewhere in the distance, a bugle played taps, the haunting melody drifting across the base like a prayer for fallen warriors. "Zara," Maya said quietly, "when you were up there today, flying like that, were you scared?" "Terrified. But you did it anyway." "Especially because I was scared. Fear means it matters. And you matter, Maya. You matter more than you know." The Pentagon's Special Operations Command briefing room existed in that liminal space between reality and classified fiction, where careers were made and broken on the strength of PowerPoint presentations and satellite imagery. Zara stood at attention before a panel of officers whose combined service record read like a history of American military intervention since Vietnam. General Patricia Hawkins, a woman whose reputation had been forged in the hills of Afghanistan and the deserts of Iraq, reviewed the incident report with the kind of methodical precision that had made her one of the most respected commanders in the special operations community. "Captain Nakamura, your actions yesterday prevented what could have been a significant security breach and civilian casualties. However, your methods were unorthodox." "Yes, ma'am." Using an FA-18 Super Hornet as a psychological warfare platform is not exactly by-the-book procedure. "The situation required immediate intervention, ma'am. Waiting for ground forces would have allowed the hostiles to reach civilian targets. General Hawkins smiled, a rare occurrence that her staff had learned to interpret as either approval or impending doom. "Relax, Captain. You're not in trouble. In fact, we're here to discuss your next assignment." The holographic display behind the panel illuminated, showing satellite imagery of a region Zara recognized immediately. The Horn of Africa, specifically the border between Somalia and Ethiopia. Terrorist training camps, piracy coordination centers, and enough instability to keep Special Operations Forces busy for the next decade. Operation Silent Thunder, General Hawkins continued. Joint Task Force, multiple branches, highest classification level. We need someone with your particular combination of skills, aerial reconnaissance, close air support, and the kind of unconventional thinking you demonstrated yesterday. Zara studied the briefing materials, her mind automatically cataloging terrain features, potential threats, and tactical opportunities. This was the kind of mission she'd been training for her entire career, complex, dangerous, and absolutely critical to national security. "Ma'am, with respect, I have concerns about my family's security. Yesterday's incident suggests that hostile actors are targeting military personnel through their civilian relatives." "We're aware of the threat, Captain. Your sister will be provided protection, and we're actively investigating the intelligence breach that led to yesterday's events. But we need you operational, not hiding in a bunker somewhere." The weight of duty pressed against Zara's shoulders like a familiar burden. She joined the military to serve something larger than herself, to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. That mission didn't pause for personal convenience or family safety concerns. "When do I ship out, ma'am?" 48 hours, long enough to tie up loose ends and say your goodbyes." As the briefing concluded, Zara found herself thinking about Maya's question from the night before. Was she scared? Absolutely. But fear had never been permission to quit. It had always been a reason to fight harder, fly faster, and come home alive. The Mojave Desert stretched endlessly in all directions, a landscape so desolate that it seemed designed specifically for testing military equipment and the people who operated it. Zara's final training exercise before deployment involved low-level penetration of hostile airspace, simulated surface-to-air missile sites, and the kind of precision flying that separated competent pilots from legendary ones. "Ghost, this is Control. You have multiple bogies inbound from Sector 7. Recommend immediate evasive action." The FA-18's radar scope lit up like a Christmas tree, each contact representing a simulated enemy fighter determined to prevent her from reaching the target zone. Zara rolled inverted, diving toward the deck as the first wave of interceptors screamed overhead. This was what she lived for, the pure mathematics of aerial combat, where physics and skill converged into something approaching art. Every decision had consequences measured in fractions of seconds, every maneuver calculated to exploit the narrow margin between success and catastrophe. Control, Ghost. Engaging defensive systems, going electronic warfare active. The Super Hornet's sophisticated countermeasures suite came online, jamming enemy radar and deploying chaff to confuse incoming missiles. Zara's world condensed into the green glow of her HUD, the urgent warnings of her threat detection system, and the G-forces that pressed her deep into the pilot's seat. "Ghost, Control. Multiple SAM sites painting you. Recommend abort and return to base." "Negative, Control. I'm going through." She pulled up sharply, climbing toward the simulated missile envelope with the kind of calculated aggression that had earned her the Ghost call sign. The SAM sites below tracked her movement, their radar signatures lighting up her threat display like angry eyes. At the last second, she cut power and dropped like a stone, falling below the missile engagement envelope before the simulated weapons could achieve lock-on. The maneuver was so violent that her vision grayed at the edges, but she held consciousness through sheer determination. "Target acquired," she announced, locking onto the designated objective with laser precision. "Ghost is in the groove." The training mission concluded with a simulated bombing run that would have impressed her instructors at weapons school. As she pulled up from the attack dive, Zara felt the familiar satisfaction of a job well done, tempered by the knowledge that the real thing would be infinitely more dangerous. "Outstanding work, Ghost," came the voice of Colonel Morrison over the radio. "That's the kind of flying they're going to need in Somalia." Somalia, where the sun turned aircraft into flying ovens, where primitive weapons operated by desperate people could bring down the most sophisticated military hardware ever created, where American service members went to prove themselves against an enemy that refused to acknowledge the rules of conventional warfare. The farewell dinner at Maya's apartment was a carefully orchestrated exercise in normalcy, as if sharing pizza and watching old movies could somehow suspend the reality of impending deployment. Maya had cooked, an ambitious attempt at their grandmother's teriyaki recipe that was simultaneously burned and undercooked, while their mother, Helen Nakamura, provided commentary on everything from the weather to Zara's chances of finding a nice boy in the military. "You know," Helen said, refilling her wine glass with the dedication of someone who'd learned to self-medicate during her husband's multiple deployments, "when your father was your age, he'd already been to 3 different wars and had 2 kids." "Mom," Maya interjected, "times were different then." "Times are always different, sweetheart. That's not an excuse for avoiding life." Zara smiled despite herself. Her mother's unique combination of maternal concern and military pragmatism had guided the family through deployments, transfers, and the kind of uncertainty that came with loving someone who'd chosen service over security. "I'm not avoiding life, Mom. I'm living it on my own terms. Flying jets and dropping bombs is living. Flying jets and protecting people is living. There's a difference." The conversation continued through dinner, touching on everything except the obvious reality that this might be the last time they were all together. Military families learned to navigate around such possibilities, treating each gathering as precious without acknowledging why. As the evening wound down, Maya walked Zara to her car, a beat-up Honda Civic that looked distinctly out of place in a world of military precision and government-issued excellence. "Be careful over there," Maya said, her voice carefully controlled. "Always am." "No, Zara, I mean it, be careful. Don't try to be a hero, just do your job and come home." "That's the plan." They hugged with the fierce intensity that came from years of practice saying goodbye, of never knowing when such moments might become final memories. Zara breathed in her sister's scent, jasmine shampoo, and the faint residue of her college's library, and committed it to memory alongside all the other details she'd need to survive the months ahead. "Maya, if anything happens while I'm gone, anything at all, call Colonel Morrison immediately. Don't try to handle it yourself. Don't assume it's nothing important." "What kind of anything?" "The kind that makes you feel like yesterday was just the beginning." As Zara drove back to base, her rearview mirror filled with the lights of her sister's apartment complex, each window representing lives lived in the safety that people like her fought to preserve. Tomorrow, she'd be in the air again, heading toward a conflict zone where the rules were different and the stakes were measured in more than just personal safety. The C-130 Hercules transport aircraft possessed all the aerodynamic grace of a flying brick, but it had one crucial advantage over more sophisticated aircraft. It could land on practically any surface longer than a football field and still take off again. Zara strapped herself into the web seating alongside 24 other special operations personnel, each one representing years of training and millions of dollars in specialized education. The flight from California to Djibouti would take 18 hours with refueling stops, plenty of time to review mission parameters and contemplate the various ways things could go wrong in the Horn of Africa. Beside her, Master Sergeant Rodriguez, a Delta Force operator with 3 bronze stars and the kind of thousand-yard stare that came from too many close calls, was reading a paperback romance novel with surprising intensity. "Light reading?" Zara asked. "My wife writes these things," Rodriguez replied without looking up. "If I don't read them, she stops writing them. If she stops writing them, she starts paying attention to how often I'm deployed." Military humor, always dark, usually practical, invariably true. The briefing packet in Zara's lap contained satellite imagery of their operational area, a region where 3 countries converged in a maze of desert, mountains, and pure geographical hostility. Terrorist training camps had been identified along the Ethiopian border, supply routes mapped through Somali territory, and somewhere in that wasteland, American intelligence assets had gone silent. "Ghost," called Captain Jake Morrison, the colonel's son and leader of the ground team Zara would be supporting. "You ever operated in this kind of terrain before?" "Afghanistan has some similarities. Different kind of heat, same level of people trying to kill you." "Roger that. Just remember, out there we don't have the luxury of nearby bases or friendly airspace. Once we're on the ground, you're our lifeline to the outside world." The responsibility settled onto Zara's shoulders like a familiar weight. In Afghanistan, she provided close air support for ground forces, turning the tide of battles through precision bombing and reconnaissance. But this mission was different: smaller teams, longer distances, higher stakes. As the C-130 droned eastward through the night, Zara found herself thinking about the phone calls Maya had received, the systematic intelligence gathering that had preceded the attack on Camp Pendleton. Coincidences were rare in the special operations world. Someone had wanted her deployed to Africa, had created the conditions that made her assignment inevitable. She was walking into a trap. The only question was whether she'd be smart enough to spring it on her own terms. Outside the aircraft's small windows, the Atlantic Ocean passed beneath them in endless darkness, each mile carrying her further from the safety of home and deeper into the kind of conflict where survival depended on skill, luck, and the willingness to do whatever it took to complete the mission. Camp Lemonnier, Djibouti, existed at the intersection of military necessity and geographical impossibility, a sprawling American base carved from desert that hadn't seen rain in living memory. The moment Zara stepped off the transport aircraft, the heat hit her like a physical force, dry air that seemed to leach moisture from every surface it touched. "Welcome to the asshole of Africa," announced Major Lisa Chen, the base operations officer who'd been assigned to brief incoming personnel. "Temperature today is 112 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity is approximately 0%, and the local wildlife consists mainly of things that want to sting, bite, or otherwise ruin your day." The assembled Special Operations Team, 12 individuals representing the cream of American military capability, listened with the stoic attention of professionals who'd heard similar briefings in similarly hostile environments. Behind them, ground crews were already preparing aircraft for the next phase of their deployment: insertion into Ethiopian airspace under cover of darkness. "Your operational area," Major Chen continued, activating a holographic display that showed terrain so desolate it looked like satellite imagery of Mars, "consists of approximately 2,000 square miles of desert, mountains, and pure geographical hostility. No friendly forces, no backup, no extraction options if things go wrong." Zara studied the briefing materials with the methodical attention she'd learned to apply to survival-critical information. The target was a terrorist training facility that had been operating with impunity in the border region, training fighters who'd later surface in attacks across East Africa. Intelligence suggested that American citizens had been taken there: journalists, aid workers, possibly intelligence operatives. "Ghost," Major Chen called, pulling Zara aside after the general briefing. We need to discuss your specific role in this operation." They walked to a secure briefing room where the air conditioning battled valiantly against the African heat and generally lost. On the wall, a map of the operational area was marked with flight paths, potential threats, and the kind of detailed intelligence that came from months of satellite surveillance and human sources. "You'll be flying solo out there," Major Chen explained. "No wingman, no backup, no cavalry riding to the rescue if things get complicated. Your job is to provide reconnaissance, close air support, and extraction support for Captain Morrison's team." "Understood, ma'am. What about hostile air defenses?" "Minimal but present. The terrorists have access to shoulder-fired missiles, some older Soviet-era systems, and enough small arms to make low-level flying extremely hazardous. Your survival depends on staying fast, staying high, and staying unpredictable." As the briefing concluded, Zara found herself thinking about the systematic way her personal life had been investigated before this deployment. Someone had wanted her here, in this specific place, facing this particular mission. The question was whether that someone was on her side or working for the other team. The FA-18E Super Hornet designated for her mission had been modified for extended-range operations. Additional fuel tanks and electronic warfare equipment replacing some of the standard armament. Zara conducted her pre-flight inspection with obsessive thoroughness, checking every system that might mean the difference between success and becoming a smoking crater in the Ethiopian highlands. "She's a good bird," announced Staff Sergeant Williams, the crew chief who'd been babying the aircraft through the harsh conditions of East African deployment. "New engines, upgraded avionics, enough firepower to level a city block if you're feeling particularly motivated." Zara ran her hands along the aircraft's skin, feeling for the subtle imperfections that might indicate structural damage or maintenance issues. In combat zones, aircraft maintenance was part science, part art, and part prayer to whatever gods protected pilots from their own machine's tendency toward mechanical failure at the worst possible moments. "What's the bird's combat history?" "2 deployments to Afghanistan, 1 to Syria. She's seen some action but nothing she couldn't handle. Previous pilot called her Valkyrie, said she had a tendency to show up exactly when things looked hopeless." As evening descended over the African desert, Zara completed her final mission preparations. Maps were memorized, radio frequencies programmed, weapons systems tested. Captain Morrison's ground team would insert via helicopter at 200 hours. She'd provide overwatch beginning at 400, maintaining station above the target area until the mission was complete or extraction became necessary. "Ghost, this is Morrison," came the voice over her radio as she settled into the cockpit. "We're wheels up in 30 minutes. You ready for this?" "Born ready, ground team. See you on the other side." The Super Hornet's engines spooled up with their familiar whine, twin afterburners painting the desert night in shades of blue flame. As Zara taxied toward the runway, she thought about Maya's request to be